Welcome, everyone, to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And today we have a really interesting conversation with Kari Hanson. Now, Kari, you are a chief marketing officer. You actually are one of the very few that actually went to school to be a marketer. I've talked to so many people that are like engineers that turn marketers, all kinds of background. But you've done this your whole life, B2B marketing. You've gone from seeding, seed rounds, companies, all the way through IPO, and you actually created a new category that then took that company and went through IPO. So that's a fantastic achievement. So congratulations. We're going to take all of that and we're going to talk about how do we make more predictable revenue systems? And I called it a contrarian point of view you had, because we know that we are being asked more and more and more and more to be more pipeline focused, driving revenues, right? Far more than we ever have before. So we have to, and we also know that there's massive trends that are going against us in terms of the B2B buyer waiting longer and longer to even want to talk to us, and the sales department, which makes marketing's role actually more important than ever, because they're consuming more and more content to make their decisions before they talk to us. So we're at an interesting juncture in time, but we're going to talk from chaos to clarity, creating predictable revenue systems. But before we get into that, I would love to turn it over to you and maybe just explain a little bit more about your background.
Yeah, well, thanks for that introduction. I feel like my mother could have written that. It's quite literally. Yeah, so I've been in B2B marketing my entire career. I did go to school. I actually started out as a computer science major way back when, before it was the cool thing. And I will never forget my first program that we wrote. I was on Turbo Pascal, which I think is a dead language now. So don't ask me to program anything. But everybody came up with these really complex, it was a business school, all these complex programs. And mine was two people walking and champagne popping. And it was really cool, but it was before there was visual. It was all, the letters of the program turned into this champagne thing. And my computer science professor pulled me aside and was like, I want to introduce you to the marketing professors because you are clearly on the wrong track. I realized that perhaps they were right. So, I went into marketing. I started out at a PR agency working with a bunch of startups who all ended up wanting to be acquired, moving on. So I got to see a whole bunch of perspective, which gave me a nice boot camp. And then I went into, the other side of the desk, as they would say. Again, I slowly over my career have done every piece of marketing at every size of a company. And the only thing that is still true is that what worked yesterday probably is not going to work tomorrow. And so I think that's the state of the state for marketers right now, but it's also what makes it so fun.
It does make it fun. Along the way, that's fun. We run into VC firms and PE firms that want predictability, boards that want predictability, the rest of the C-suite, our CEOs, our CFOs that want predictability. We want predictability, right? But your point of view is that predictability is more elusive than it ever has been in modern B2B, right? But what was interesting is you contrasted that to the fact that, we have more tools today. We have more data. We have supposedly more insights into the market and what's going on and what's working and what's not. So why is it more elusive predictability in B2B growth than ever before, despite having that much more view into the market and what we could be doing?
Yeah, I feel like that, it's sort of the disclaimer of, yesterday's returns do not predict tomorrow's futures. But I think AI has brought us many things. I believe in the potential of AI. I think it is a game changer on many fronts, but it eliminated predictability. It took it away from us in many ways and for many reasons. And perhaps over time it will come back, but I think it is changing how people are consuming on a regular basis. And so we can no longer predict. And frankly, we can't even say how the large LLMs, there's no way to even say, here's how people are going to use them in the next quarter. I don't buy it because that predictability is completely gone because we're remaking. And this is sort of what happens when you go through such a seismic shift that everything is changing, how people are consuming, creating everything. There, by definition, is no more predictability because we're completely remaking it. And so, not that I'm old enough to be pre-internet, but I am old enough in my marketing career to remember there was a time before when I came out of school, just as everyone was getting a website. And there was a time before this mass email marketing was a platform. And there was a time before search engine were a thing. And if you remember when Google came out, they were proud that they had no ads. And then suddenly they had ads. And there was a time before LinkedIn. And so every shift and, even mobile, every shift changes how people do things. And I think AI blew everything else up. And so, for as much as I have more visibility than I've ever had, it has eliminated any predictability. I don't think anybody could say what's going to happen over the next couple of quarters. And the challenge, frankly, is everybody wants predictability because you can't scale without it, right? Like you can't say, give me $1, I'm going to give you $10 and I'm going to do it this way. Like there is no scale, which is sort of the reliable growth. You can have viral moments and here and there, but you can't scale at the pace that you want without having that predictability. And so, it's this yin and yang that we're struggling with right now.
That's a dire outlook. And we're not going to stay on there because you have some really great suggestions here. But before we move on, how do we define AI and its role in our growth? Because everybody from the board on down, everybody's looking at us and saying, what's your take on AI? What are you doing with AI? Right. And a lot of it is on how do you become more efficient, right? How do you do more with less? But your point of view is that's not always the case, right? That AI has an opportunity to do a lot more in our growth. And I'd love to just explore that for a moment.
Yeah, well, so there's two threads there. One, I think AI presents this huge opportunity for go-to-market, especially for marketers, but it also is presenting the biggest challenge that we've ever faced. So on the one hand, AI automates a lot of things, and we have a lot of people who are taking the easy path and they don't know what they're doing and they're automating bad behaviors. And this is why email spam is out of control. The robocalls are out of control. The personalization, but it's completely odd and in some ways creepy of, I know where you went to high school, like really weird use cases, but then also what it can be wrong. And so you just have this onslaught of the AI slop, as it's called, and it's coming at a crazy pace. And then you also have the easy button for content, and AI can just make all of this content, but it's the same thing and it's based on pre-published. So there's nothing new, but it's just spam, 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 spam. And so it's making it really hard to stand out. And it's also taking, everyone says outbound is dead, email is dead. But when you do it right, it can work really well. And so I think AI is creating that really big challenge of just automating. And, people call it the easy button. I call it the lazy button because some things should not be automated. Like some things should actually be eliminated and we shouldn't do it. And AI is just doing it all and it doesn't cost very much, so it's easy to just try it, spray and pray, and then move on. And so I think as a marketer, that's really challenging for us to do that. And then, it does do a lot of things. Like we can move faster. We can do things better. We can be a lot more efficient. But I do think this, the AI hype is we'll just do more with less. And it's, from a marketing perspective, we went into COVID. We did a lot more with a lot less because we had to. And then coming out of it, there was like this big boom. And then coming out of that, everyone was like, oh, budgets are overstretched. Maybe we need to scale back. I think every marketer I know reined in their budget but still had the same expectation. So we were doing more with less. And then we saw, well, maybe we're not going to hire at the pace we're going to. Let's just sort of slow that down a little bit. But you still have to, in terms of growing, you have to deliver more results. So we're still doing more with less. And then you throw in, oh, you have to compete with AI and you have to get more content out faster, but it can't be the AI slop. So it's got to be better. So we're doing, our people are doing more with less. And then you throw in, well, AI has made outbound really challenging. Like that gone are the days of cold calling. And, it used to be marketing would contribute a certain percentage of the pipeline. Outbound would probably do 25 to 40%. And, for us, we're not seeing that. And so my marketing team is picking up the extra and delivering 95 to 100% of the pipeline with the same budget, which is the same budget as to go farther. And as we start growing as a company, we want to do more things and add more events, but we don't have more money. And so it's the more with less, it's like on and on and on. And I do think we're sort of at this place where there are certainly companies, there are certainly teams, marketing teams who probably could do more with less and they could be a little bit more efficient. But I don't think that that's the answer. I think it's more of AI can help us be efficient. It can fix a lot of the gaps, but we need to spend more on AI to, you sort of have to slow down to move faster. And I think the potential for AI is really around not doing more, like not just sort of the lazy button, but it's being smarter and being more intelligent and understanding like, what is happening, what is driving the biggest impact, how can I do more of that? And eventually at some point, being able to take the foundations of a go-to-market strategy that worked really well, that's based on trust, based on a relationship, based on authenticity, but scales that at, that one-to-one relationship at 1 to a 10,000 at scale. And I'm not saying, the bots are going to talk to the bots. I don't believe that. But I do think AI can help us get to a place where one person can talk to many in a personalized, authentic way very quickly. But that's not an efficiency story at all. That's more like an optimization story in my mind. And it requires investment to scale and get there.
So a couple of different things. I'm going to ask them all at the same time, but you talked about building trust and authenticity. And most people are extraordinarily worried that AI is going in the opposite direction of that for a lot of the things that you just talked about. But trust is on the massive decline. In fact, the latest trust barometer from LinkedIn and Edelman showed that of 32,000 international respondents worldwide, that they think we as business leaders are 61% think we're being intentionally misleading. Intentionally misleading. So now put AI slop, as you put it, on top of that. We are adding gasoline to the trust epidemic that is happening here, right? So one of the things that you had said in our earlier conversation was that we need to use AI, and you said here, smarter, for more insight, more foresight into what we're doing, and not look at it as just an efficiency tool, right? And better automation. Absolutely, done the right way, we can do that. But you have a specific point of view on how do we get insight and foresight? Because like if you were to go to ChatGPT today and just type in what are the top 5 reasons why businesses aren't using ChatGPT correctly, one of those things that comes up is a lack of the right data. In other words, garbage in, garbage out, right? No insights in, no foresight out. We got to train our AI models beyond just the standard, right? What they kind of know in the market, which everybody in the market knows. And you and I started talking about the voice of the customer as a really integral part of this. And that's where I think the story changes from dire, oh no, what are we going to do, to, wow, there is a path, there is a solution. And I just wanted to bring that up. And how does the voice of the customer enter into this conversation, adding more predictability, more foresight, more insight so that we actually can provide more predictability in our growth?
Yeah, I think for me, AI reminds me, at least where we are now, nobody trusts it, nobody believes it. It's wrong as often as it's right. It can hallucinate. Sometimes it's like, oh, it's good enough. But when it's wrong and it's really wrong, like if you get an email talking, hey, Steve, I'm going to reach out to you because I saw you were doing something with, the NFL teams. And you're like, I have nothing to do with NFL. Like, it's so wrong. And so then you're just like, oh, I mistrust it. Like to me, it reminds me of Wikipedia. When Wikipedia first came out, it was the wisdom of the crowd. Well, then very quickly, everybody realized it's actually not everyone should have an opinion on, an online encyclopedia. And suddenly you saw, colleges and schools were saying you cannot cite Wikipedia as a source because it is unreliable. Because, who am I to go have an opinion or, make a correction around, dinosaurs, for example. Like my son who wants to be a paleontologist would be horrified at the idea that, I would have an opinion. And so, but this was the problem. And so then Wikipedia, I think over the years, it has sort of course corrected a little bit. You have to have a reliable link. But, it started out as this, the wisdom of the crowd, and it became the idiocy of the crowds because it was like the more people that weigh in, you lose more value because, if you want to have an expert opinion, you need to have an expert. And I think the challenge with AI right now is because it's based on everything, going into your example around, like a GPT or, training a model to go do something, every company is using the same thing. And so you could say, here's what my ICP is, here's their title, here's their company. And suddenly it's telling you, well, here's the content you could produce. But spoiler alert, it's telling every one of your competitors the exact same thing. And suddenly everyone sounds the same and there's no differentiation Because what it's missing, just like Wikipedia was missing the expert's opinion, not opinion, the expert's fact of this is where it is. I'm going to cite the Encyclopedia Britannica. AI misses the context, and the context is king. And I firmly believe it's the reason that AI is going to change our jobs, but we are not going to lose our jobs because we have the experience and the context. And specifically with the voice of the customer, that's your context. And so, one of the things we were talking about is I am a huge believer in voice of the customer. I think right now the challenge with a lot of companies is every department is talking to the customer, but they have a different lens. So, our head of product will be talking to customers. She's asking questions about, how are they using the product? What are they looking at down the road? In a very specific lens. And I'm not going to say she's leading the witness, but she's going down a certain path. If somebody from, the customer success team is talking to them, they have a very different lens that they're going down. If somebody from, support is talking to them, they're like, everybody has a different lens. And I think this is where marketers need to sort of be the thread across all of them, because we have to connect all of the lenses and up level it a little bit. And when you start having those conversations and you can train your AI based on what your customers are saying, both the buyers and the users, which are usually different people, the executives, the influencers, like the multiple points, and you can add that context, then suddenly the AI becomes very powerful. And I think it has a lot of potential for the go-to-market teams for many ways, but I also understand, it's not as simple as, just getting call transcripts, because the call transcripts right now are very oriented into whoever's talking to that customer has a very specific question, and it's not connecting all of the dots. And so it's that context is not there, and you're training your AI on very specific lenses without the broader picture. And I think that's where, the voice of the customer is going to get lost if someone's not paying attention to it.
Well, here's an interesting fact, right? The world of B2C, they have C-suite roles called chief customer officer, chief experience officer, like somebody who's responsible for taking all those conversations, all those different lenses, and running their own conversations on top of that and coming up with what we all know is really important. There is one voice of authority in our business, right? And it's the voice of the customer. But if we ask it from the unique point of view, so like a sales team, they're having conversations every day, to your point of view, with prospects that turn into customers. But it is through the lens of a sales conversation. There's actually a shield that's up in between, right? I'm being sold to, and I know it. I'm not going to sit back. It's why most CMOs, when they take on a new role, they just start calling customers, right? And the first thing we say is, this is a non-sales conversation. I'm just here to learn, right? And we ask things like, what is it that we do for you? Like really interesting questions that seem very generic, right? But you would never design a voice of the market program to run through a department that was set up to do something very different as their number one objective. Even customer success, their number one goal, cross-sell and upsell. 73% of new B2B revenue, new annual revenue, according to Forrester, comes from existing customers, right? So a sales objective, a product development objective. And by the way, we have a roadmap we want to show you, right? So I guess here's my question is, if we need to have marketing, and by the way, McKinsey, Gartner, Forrester, everybody has said and come out and said that the CMO should play the role of the chief customer officer in a B2B organization. That's my first question then. If we're all kind of in agreement that we need a voice of the customer that unites all these lenses, and that is the source to train our AI, right, on not just generic data that everybody has, but our unique go-to-market strategy combined with their unique needs, how do we go about doing that? And I'll tell you why we're not doing it. Because McKinsey came out and said only 15% of companies actually execute on a voice of customer program. And I've had many CROs tell me and CMOs tell me, oh, I think that's too high, Steve. So that's the big question. How do we do this?
Yeah, well, it's challenging for many reasons. And one, I do think a lot of B2B companies do have a chief customer officer, but it's typically the person who owns customer success, support, and their role is to make the customers happy. And like they should know the voice of their customers in that perspective. And to me, I think it's not about changing somebody's role. Like I think everyone should be talking to the customer, but I think instead of saying, well, I had a conversation with the customer and making that the voice, I do think this is where marketing needs to be sort of that overlaying, more strategic of here's what they're saying to our product team, here's what they're saying to our customer team, here's what they're saying to our execs. But then we also need to ask the questions that no one wants to know. And it's not just what are we doing for you? What are we not doing for you? What are you still worried about? What is, when you go talk to your boss, like what are the three things that are always on the table? And they might have absolutely nothing to do with our product, our platform, anything, but like, what are you really worried about? Because everyone typically says, when you sell to a customer, they're worried about one of two things. Like, are they going to save money? Are they going to make money? And it's like, well, maybe, but also maybe they're worried about something else. And I also think one of the voices of the customer program, if you will, that people tend to forget is the customer that you lost, that churned. Honestly, why did you leave? Not, and it's always like, oh, something with the pride, but it's like, let the dust settle, let them get away, have a conversation with them, have a conversation with prospects that you lost, and actually ask them, why'd you go with someone else? And sometimes it's sort of that intangible, oh, well, it just seemed like they were more interested in me. Or, I tried to, maybe they were a customer and they left because they wanted help. They were dismissed because you didn't think it was a big deal, but it actually was a really big deal to me. And likewise, then you start finding these threads where then you go start to talk to the customers about, well, why do you stick with us? Not product related. And a lot of times where you really get the differentiation, at least for us, you'll start hearing, well, when I work with so-and-so on the CS team, it's like she's part of my team and she understands. And like, it's these intangible things, but that's what makes everybody stand out because at the end of the day, especially with AI, you can put out a new feature. Somebody else is going to come out with it too. And so I think to me, I feel like it's every department should be talking to the customer, but you have to sort of have that layer on top of it. But also the customer has to be more broad of its current customers, its past customers, its unhappy customers, its customers who didn't even come to you to get that view. I think this is where analysts, they're not necessarily customers, but I always love, if you ever talk to Gartner, my first question is, what do you hate about us? What do you hear? Like, call my baby ugly, please. And because if even not asking the question, they still have the opinion. So tell me, because as a marketer, the only way I know how to change your opinion is to know what your opinion is in the first place, right?
Oh, I love this. So let me ask you a question because here's where I think you've flipped the model. Because most of the conversations with customers that we're having today start out about us, our product that we are selling, that we're creating a roadmap on, that we're selling, that we're cross-selling, that we're upselling, right? And Gong did a big study and they showed that the sales rep talks 2/3 to 3/4 of the time. So our conversations usually start out about us, and that's how vendors relate, right? We talk about us, where what you just said is, I want to know about your challenges. And they might be out here this broad where we're going to help you with this much. But what they want is the trusted advisor, right? They want somebody that's not a vendor selling them. They want somebody that comes in, understands their bigger picture, and can give them a different point of view, can give them something else to think about, right? And hopefully within there, and almost always, there is a path for us as an organization to help them if we're talking to our true ICP. I think you just flipped the model there because my biggest takeaway is talk to them about them, not talk to them about us. Is that like just kind of a very broad umbrella over what you just said, a good takeaway?
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the best pieces of advice I got early on in my career was we were doing sort of a voice of the customer survey. And, my boss at the time, she was like, you're leading the witness. If you ask them you're pointing them down a path. And I was like, oh, and it's understanding when you're having these conversations, you're not there to solve, you're not there to prove, like you just are interviewing them and hearing what's going on. And then you start but it's just one anecdote. And the problem is you need multiple anecdotes to start seeing a trend. And so, part of the challenge too is if you talk specifically about the product and you're like, hey, how do you like we're headed in this direction. Do you like option A or B? Well, they're going to choose A or B, and then that's where you go. But if you ask questions around, in a perfect world, in 3 years, like what would somebody in this space be doing? They might be throwing out option C. And you're like, well, that's interesting. But then if a whole bunch of people start throwing out option C, maybe you actually realize more often than not that your option A actually solves option C, but you're using the wrong language, or you're presenting it very tactically, but it leads towards something bigger. And I think this is where if you can get them to talk, what's on their mind, what are they working, like, what are they looking for? You can start getting those trends, and then you start connecting the department level. What are they saying to the product team? What are they saying to the sales team? Because you start backing it up a little bit, because you don't want to hear a couple things and then run in that direction. But it's really about understanding, where do you view the market going and your value? Where do your customers and future customers see you? And what's the delta between the two? Because that's what marketing is, right? Is fixing that delta. And it's either accelerating, picking up on, the one thing that they like. Maybe it's the one thing they don't like, but it's just sort of hearing it. And I think, going back to your original question of, why is this so hard? 15% of marketing teams are doing it. The challenge is, I believe very strongly in this. I get very busy. I can tell you, like, I don't talk to customers enough. Like, it gets really, really hard to keep this a priority because you have everything else coming. And then, we actually had an open house at our office. Some customers came and I was like, oh yeah, this is so great. Like, just having these conversations. And it's like, yes, I have to get back into it. And then you do it. And then we're doing more with less. We all are doing more with less. And so making it an ongoing priority can be really challenging. But the more that you can train everybody, hey, if you talk to a customer, here's one question to ask, or pick their brain about this, you can start getting, this is where AI, going back to our original conversation, if you can feed the right questions, even in these other, department level conversations, AI can still pull it out for you. And so then you can start, over time, still seeing what's going on, or you can listen, you can train the AI. These are the 3 things I'm looking for. Go listen to the first calls that we're recording. Do you see, like, what do you see coming up? And just see what's coming up from a trends perspective to sort of bubble it up. Like, as much as I want to be on the phone with customers all the time, we don't all have time. And frankly, they don't have time to do it. It's, every one of their vendors asked for 30 minutes. They don't have the time, but we are talking to them. And so it's still pulling the threads in a way that can intelligently influence it. But it's all about, what are the unasked questions? What's on their mind? What do they care about? And then how do you feed into that?
So I have to tell you, we've covered a lot of territory here today. And I just want to give you an opportunity to take all of this and say, if there is one thing that the C-suite executives that are going to be tuning into this podcast, if there was one thing out of everything that we've talked about here today that you want them to take away, what would that be?
I think if we went back to, when you and I first started, we were talking about predictability and scale. I would say my takeaway is, the goal is every company wants to scale, right? You need to have the growth. You need to hit certain digits to get funding, to be profitable, to head towards the next, whatever you're doing, you need to have the scale, right? Like, nobody just wants to plateau. And in order to do that, it's really about finding that predictability, but being able to understand that you're not going to have the level of predictability you've had in the past. And AI is not going to make you more efficient in that direction, will make you efficient in other ways. But I think this is where AI can help you. The way that you can influence the predictability, obviously, we're sort of dancing around it. We're talking about brand, right? Like, as much as we're trying to optimize lead generation, demand capture, pipeline creation, because then in theory, if I can create X number of pipeline, you could close X number of pipeline. We have a very predictable path. But the challenge is, you might not be able to close at that predictable rate. I might not be able to create at that predictable rate, but the brand and really understanding that voice of the customer and where can you thread some things, you might be able to influence one or the other. And so maybe I bring in less, but you close more. Maybe I bring in more, you close less. But, to me, that's the piece that feeds ultimately the predictability in a very unpredictable way, if you will.
The voice of the customer is kind of like the fuel that feeds this predictability. I love that. I know people are going to have questions. Is it appropriate that I give out a link to your LinkedIn profile that people could reach out to you?
Yeah, I'm Kari Hanson on LinkedIn. I love to have random conversations. I love to, sort of talk to people and brainstorm about AI, especially because I do think it's going to completely change AI. or the go-to-market approach. I do think that the way everyone is promising AI is going to change it is completely wrong. And so I always love to hear people having well, here's how it's actually helping me, because the piece that we don't have right now is, the actual examples of I moved the needle doing this, I moved the needle doing this. And the more that we can piece that together, then we'll all be more predictable at some point and the chaos will clarify a little bit.
I have to tell you, the mission of this podcast is to be the accumulation of C-suite executives all over the world that are dealing with their growth challenges in their B2B business. And we all have different insights. We have different perspectives. We have different backgrounds. And if we could bring all that together and share with each other, then that's the rising tide that lifts all boats. And you were an amazing part of that rising tide today. I just wanted to say thank you for coming on.
No, well, thank you for having me. I love talking about this. So hopefully it's helpful.